Like business ethics was some of the topic last week, this Wednesday. A lot of companies we talked about still doing a lot of unethical business practice. So we discussed like why the companies keep doing the unethical business practice. And also, in saying business bad practice or malpractice, what we are actually talking about. So, you may think that business malpractice or bad practice can be kind of a business doing over society, right? Just what we noticed very recently in our society, right? Oxy crisis this day, the company used a kind of not good materials for that sterilizer. So probably the company's behavior over the society in very bad way would be also unethical behavior, but also that doesn't really the unethical action of the firms. The employee and employees, employers and employees, and company to shareholders and company to community. So the scope of unethical behaviors are quite large. So unethical behavior is actually happening everywhere. So what we particularly paid attention was moral behavior that you should not really, you should do in your workplace. So then we talk also about why then companies keep doing this unethical behavior. Simply first because unintentionally company may does that unethical behavior, or sometimes companies really don't know what's right or what's wrong behavior of the firms over the lots of stakeholders. So committing like this kind of unethical behavior, business practices are actually widespread everywhere. So we just keep asking to ourselves, why CEO, especially the top management, committing this kind of unethical behaviors? And so in your opinions, why the CEO and the top management are doing lots of this behavior? Are they too greed, or are they just maniac for money? So why are they doing this unethical behavior? So that is the question. If the top management really changed, then we don't need to worry about this kind of unethical behaviors. Studies shows investigating these questions. Why we just keep doing over and over again this kind of wrong behavior? Simply because lots of companies are very much output-oriented. They tend to have a very output-oriented target all the times. Revenue increase, your output, or what matter really for your organization business, a company's action, right? You have to increase your revenue all the times. You have to have more market share all the times. Because of that pressure, the managers keep doing, even though they shouldn't do for employees, societies. I think when we're talking about unethical, because the ethical behavior, ethical business practice are getting more like urgent issue this day, because mostly we are living in the more globalized society. Because of the globalization, your business field is actually everywhere, not only in your home country, but also in other countries you do the business. But the problem is that your business practice are like the standard of ethical business practice are not always the same across different countries. The countries actually vary widely a lot about their ethical kind of a code of ethics, code of right conduct, and so on. So that's why the ethical behavior of firms are strictly more important. So what company this day try to do, especially the global firms, trying to do is that they just try to have a firm their own standard by making lots of questions to test themselves whether their actions are really ethical or not. It's like Texas Instruments, which are one of the IT company in USA, as you see here, design a lot of quick tests to check the company's, if the company's behavior is ethically right or wrong. Just like by going through from the question 1 to 7, the company can figure out whether the firm's actions are right or wrong. If you see here, lots of questions here raised, ask themselves, like, is the action legal? Does the action comply with the value of the firms? So if you do it, will you feel bad or good, and so on. So a lot of companies nowadays tend to have their own kind of a quick test of ethics. These are the example of Texas Instruments, and also Shears, one of the retail company in USA, also has their own guideline of ethical behaviors. If the answer of this question say no or not sure, then certainly you can say that the company's action, business practice are not really ethically correct. So the trend this day is companies tend to have very strong ethical code of ethics. By stick to that strong, firm code of ethics, companies may expect a lot of benefits from sticking to that code of ethics. If you actually stick to the ethical code, it is actually protecting your company's a lot of profit. Pride also increased, loyalty, consumer loyalty would also be increased. And you will create more public goodwill, consumer goodwill, and so on. So in the long term, the ethical code is quite abiding by the ethical code, doing strictly following the ethical codes are quite good to your firms as well. But the content of the ethical code or code of conduct, kind of a code of conduct or kind of a discipline of your company's actions. So whenever your company do some action, you just check and compare it with this kind of a guideline here. So this day, the content of the code of ethics, code of conduct are pretty much related to this one. Your employment practice, when you're actually hiring or recruiting people from outside organization, the code of conduct strictly applied. Also, when you do the form the relationship with your supplier, client, a vendor means somebody who supply your product to the customers. So when you actually making deal with these stakeholders, a strong code of conduct actually applied. And also where there is a strong conflict of interest, code of ethics conduct may be the solution to solve that dispute and conflict. So this day, a lot of companies carry their own Bible-like code of conduct. So it is kind of a law and a firm, strong kind of institutional body that really governing all of your, governing all of your company's actions. So that's pretty much what company these days do. Again, we just look at the ethical behavior of the firms are getting more important because the marketplace of the firms are much more globalized. Again, in Korea, for instance, like bribing something to your business partner, government is strictly not allowed legal. You go to jail. So the much more like the society and business transactions are much more transparent. But like in China, for instance, like giving and taking small amount of say bribery or commission things to the business partners, quite okay. Not really that bad idea in China. So ethical behaviors are widely different. So if your company is actually running businesses, say in other countries, so so in that case, your rule should be followed in that particular cultures. This is a very classic example, like when Korean companies first enter into lots of other countries, like especially Eastern Europe, Western Europe. You see the code of conduct, especially the management dealing with employees, are totally different there compared to here. Like overtime working, right? It's quite common, right? Staying over at your company for doing some job late at night, quite common, but not really so in Europe. But a lot of mistake of many Korean companies in Europe when somewhere in 90s or early even 21st century. So same business practice actually used in European countries, especially to the employees there. So strongly push people there at the time, like overtime working, right? And also HRM practice was much more like flexible, like they do in Korea. So those are pretty much considered as a unethical behavior and bad business practice. Simply, the European standard of business practice are totally different from Korean standard of business practice. So, ethical behavior in global market pretty much key and acute issues more and more. So just talk about globalization first before we talking about ethical issues in your operation in other countries. I think a lot of you guys already I understand that the like globalization, internationalization were pretty much common, say debate topic in the classroom. So I would just want to ask, what was like anyway the globalization? What is internationalization? Do you have any ideas? What is globalization? Yeah. Economy and cultures are unified, getting integrated, right? So what about then internationalization? Right? Yeah, the globalization, as you define, it is more like trying to be a lot of diversity, getting more integrated, become unified, getting more like as one. So that is a globalization. Like if you have read the books like Friedman's "The World is Flat," how many of you have read this one? The World is Flat. Written, I think at the beginning of the year 2000. The world is flat. Actually, the Friedman in his book here raised key issues about like define what is globalization, what kind of society is actually created in the world where the world is flat. So world is flat is like different culture, different customs, different say nature of different publics are getting more similar and similar. Our taste, preference are getting more similar. So your business practice also getting much more alike each other. That's I think the point of globalization and also Friedman's argument in his book. So we are getting more similar each other, right? So which means that like institution, regulation, law getting more similar, very much alike each other. while the internationalization simply means like your presence getting more increased. So your presence not only limited in the home country, but you are present at many different countries. So you are actually everywhere. So that's pretty much like what internationalization. You just go out everywhere. So people in all other countries may see or find, buy your product, service everywhere. So simply spreading your activity in many different countries across the world is simply internationalization. So I think the internationalization emphasizes much more like diversity of your activity, your presence, and so on. While the globalization is quite opposite concept in a way that words are getting more similar and similar, not different and different. But in fact, if we're talking about ethics here, especially the business ethics here, the world is much more like more and more internationalized rather than globalized. I mean, you will figure out this one when you take the international business. What's the difference between international strategy and global strategy? Technically, those two terms are pretty much different, but practitioners actually interchangeably use that word a lot. But just talk about that one later. But now we talk about how internationalization, diversity, your expansion to other world actually changed your ethical business practice. So that's the point. So what kind of difficulty you will actually have because of different ethical standards in other countries. Like especially in commercial area, the ethical behavior is strictly imposed on your business practice. If you see the newspaper, the TV advertisement here, we see a lot of children on TV, in TV commercial, right? Right, the TV commercial, the children are pretty much shown a lot in commercial on TV. But if you do use children on TV commercial in, say, France, you will go to jail. I'm not sure you will go to jail, but you will pay a huge fine. Using child in any kind of commercial purpose is quite considered as unethical. So business practice in other countries should concern what are the ethical standards there. A lot of difference you may find. Interesting case, I think the textbook introduced. Before we talk about it, let's briefly actually review what we already have studied last year or previous year in your school, in your high school. So yeah, this is like the definition of internationalization. So yeah, the firm try to increase their awareness in all other business. So that's simply internationalization. So while the globalization is actually indicating integration. Right. So we know that there are a lot of anti-globalization, or what we call an anti-globalist. So in your opinion, do you agree or disagree? Do you support or not support this globalization? What's your opinion? How many of you here say, I don't like the globalization? Or how many of you here, I don't care? You don't care, right? So, honestly, I don't care. And from business perspective, globalization simply, I don't know how it impacts to the society, because the kind of things that probably the politicians try to solve, but also the power figure should handle that things. But from the business perspective, globalization, internationalization simply means that you have to think about your way of production, your way of, say, marketing totally in different way in the globalization, right? So in business field, criticizing globalization, internationalization is actually a outdated issue. We no longer talk about it, pros and cons. What we're more concerned about is how we are actually reacting to the globalization, if it is actually there, here, right? So globalization to business field means you have to transform your marketing, your, say, purchasing, production, totally in different way, right? Like, what is outsourcing? So you will talk this one a lot in business course. What is outsourcing? Yep.
For example, like Nike, they're manufacturing
Mm-hmm.
in like countries with low labor costs,
Mm-hmm.
like China, Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
those areas.
Mm-hmm. So outsourcing simply means you just rely on, say, as you said, all people simply, is it what you call is offshoring, right? So offshoring is kind of outsourcing. So you just use partners in other countries for your productions. If that action is not really the core parts, like Nike case, yeah, yeah.
Outsourcing, like purchasing from other countries to buy it cheaper?
Yeah, that is also outsourcing. So rather than you do it by yourself, you just do something with or from other partners. It may be in your country or in other countries. So that all includes outsourcing. Offshoring means if that partner is out of your country, then that's what we call offshoring. Yeah.
Is it when like a company like, let's say for example like the cleaners in the company aren't your employees, but they're from a different company that is providing that service?
So that is also, yeah, outsourcing. So this day, no company really finds themselves doing all of the things by themselves. A lot of companies actually do lots of things with the outsourcing partners from in other countries. Like banana. How many banana? I mean, you may laugh at this fact. In my, say, elementary school or high school, you just cannot have banana all year round. You only have the banana or strawberry in particular season of the years because the company, banana producer, only produce it in specific certain season of the year. But this day we enjoy that fruit all year round because nowadays the business, because of the globalization simply. So because the market is open, you can form lots of relationship with a lot of company anywhere, anytime. So you can supply what you want all the time. So in business field, globalization, like debating, arguing pros and cons, not really interesting topic anymore. So what concern is more like how we reform, we changed, say, production and marketing under the globalization area. But during the process of reforming, restructuring, redesigning the marketing and production, your firm see a lot of problem because your business practice in one country is not good in other countries. Just like TV commercial, you spend a lot of money, right? Hiring children, introducing some product, but not right in Australia or the France. So you have to know this kind of different ethical conduct. I think the textbook introduced a very interesting case of infant, the baby formula, right? So I don't know how you grew up when you were baby, but I think I'm pretty sure like 70s and 80s where a lot of babies were actually in Korea, for instance, grew up with this baby formula rather than mother, what you call a breastfeeding bottle feeding was a typical way of raising, nurturing kids. But it said that it was actually a more business practice of baby formula provide like Nestle and Nestle, according to what it said. So after the break, let's talk about why the business ethics are pretty much more critical issue, because what kind of issues are involved in that international business practice. So we are going to talk about this one. Especially these are summarizing what ethical issues actually you have to handle. Right? Product safety, plant safety, advertisement, human rights things, environmental things, and also your daily routine of the business practice. So point A here, again, some of the activities here may be fine in your country, but not really fine in other countries. So let's look at this one after the break. Okay, just make sure that you return all of your exam. Okay. Okay. Again, product safety means that you have a kind of a strong obligation to deliver what exactly your product is, what impact of your product to the consumers. Like the baby formula case, like Nestle actually sold lots of baby formula in the 70s and 80s to babies in developed country. And by just exaggerating the fact that the baby feeding, like the bottle feeding is much better than breastfeedings. Especially less educated peoples in that like less developed country actually simply trust the message, and so the bottle feeding was actually booming. I remember like 70s and even 80s in Korea. I think I grew up with the bottle feeding, so which is not good, but at the time it considered as good, more nutrition provided. So actually, the company like Nestle made a fortune by actually telling not really the truth about the pros and cons of bottle feeding, and what's the side effect of, say, bottle feeding, and how it is sometimes unsafe to the babies. So actually that kind of a wrong malpractice of business, especially about the product in less developed countries, are very common practice. And also plant safety. I think the textbook will describe say like Bhopal tragedy, like chemical factory. The Union Carbide is a USA chemical producer. The company has a huge plant which producing like pesticide. Pesticide, and the plant was actually in Bhopal. Bhopal is kind of a small village in India. And one day, somewhere in 1984, the chemical plant blew out, killing more than almost, say, 2,000 people, and more than, say, 200,000 people injured. Why that USA Union Carbide actually commit that kind of a crisis? Because of poor inspections. They didn't really strictly follow the rule of the product safety in that developed countries. So especially probably like product safety issue in less developed country very relaxed, very lenient sometimes. So that's why you not really care like regular close examination and inspection. So that's why it caused damaging a lot of innocent people, destroying village. So the Bhopal case is one of the classic example of how a wrong ethical behavior of the companies, not doing correct plant safety rules, following the rule may actually destroy the communities. And exactly 10 years later, Korea actually commit the same, say, tragedy. Do you know what is Sampong department collapse here? Yeah, so this is actually Sampong department collapse. I remember that I think this is a PowerPoint from some other students. I remember I was in the army at that time, and I remember from the beginning in the morning it was very hot, humid day, early summer day, and feeling really bad from the morning, right? So, but on Sunday, like somewhere in the afternoon, simply the department collapsed, killing about more than 400 the shopper here. So why that the department collapsed? Why? Were you there in 1998? You were not even born there, right? Right? So pretty kid would not even exist in the world, right? So this is how it looked like, the collapse. Probably this whole center of the department just simply collapsed and disappeared. Why? Equipment. This is actually a presentation by foreign students, and this is how the students actually describe what Korea is, how that kind of accidents and the tragedies happen. Actually, this is all because of the poor plant safety, right? The major international power in East Asia. And we know that South Korea is really the king of construction, but why they had that kind of a bad experience? These are actually simply a poor plant inspection, not following the safety rules. Because the owner, Mr. Lee Jun, actually simply ignored the safety here, plant safety. So what he did was that actually he just built up more and more, a lot of heavy stuff over the roof of the huge building. So a huge building, the department building, only maintain limited way, but ignoring that kind of rules, the owner just simply built up more floors, more stores above the existing building, so the pillar cannot really sustain that heavy weight. So yeah, 6 p.m. June 29, 1994, in 22nd, the 5-story department hall collapsed. 500 people killed, 900 people injured. These are actually the size of property damage. So why did it collapse? Not really the natural disaster, not really the terrorist act, but wrecking ball was inside. Simply the building couldn't maintain the heavy stuff over the roof. So the architect really looked closely at the kind of the building standard structure. But management also ignored the warning sign of not putting too much stuff over the floor. So the problem was that over the floor there was a huge air conditioner tank filled with lots of water, 1,000 tons of water. So that's actually the problem with the collapse. So the case here, especially when you are doing the foreign operations, the safety issue, you may be wondering what kind of ethical issue you have to look more closely. Safety issue at the most, probably product safety, plant safety, and also you have to clearly look at how you are able to sell your products, advertise your product, because the practice of the advertisements are all different. And also, especially the HRM here, when you recruit people, interviewing people, or training people, every country does have their own specific rules, regulations, so you should closely look at legal aspect on that HRM issues. And obviously the environmental issue as well. So any contaminating pollution things from your product to the environment is actually you should not do. And your routine of daily operation also will be highly related to your ethical issues a lot. Again, especially the business practice case here. Commonly, the Korean companies, Korean business practice actually not sometimes welcomed or not sometimes acceptable in other countries. As I mentioned earlier, in other countries, your working hours are always strict, right? You just cannot flexibly use your working hours. Like prolonging your working hours without really agreement with your employees, not permitted, allowed. However, that happened quite a lot in other countries by Korean firms. So you have to avoid that kind of a thing. So this is purely the violation of ethical issues. So let us just conclude today here. Ethical issues in global business mean something here, right? That's actually the point. So your job certainly would be what are the specific more cases belonging to each here categories. A lot of fun or some kind of a ridiculous example you may find, especially like advertising practice as well. I remember that Hyundai car, when they advertised the products in USA, I mean, especially like a very developed country case, there are a lot of, say, limitation in displaying your product. Again, children should not be used. Also, like drinking something on TV is not strictly prohibited. So because of tough regulation and limitation, a lot of Korean companies actually had a lot of headache. They really don't know how to advertise their product on, say, USA. But the Hyundai Motor case, I think the brilliant idea for them was that they just used scooter, 다람쥐, right, on TV to advertise the company's car, and which was a very big hit. So, advertising your practice, also, you should be very keen at doing this one because it is ethical, really part. So next Monday or Tuesday, we just try to look at lots of specific regulation used in global marketplace, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. So that part will be covered next week.